I would have asked, is my talking hindering my work? Is it slowing us down? Am I not completing the task? They would probably say no. It's like, okay, then I don't see why I need to be quiet just because you don't like it.
You're listening to the DaliTalks Podcast where my mom, Dali, empowers parents like you with parenting tips. My mom's mission is to help parents make their child raising experience easier and more enjoyable by sharing valuable lessons to save them unnecessary struggles. The DaliTalks Podcast is for any person already parenting or planning on parenting a child. Each week you'll hear different experts talk with my mom about important aspects of parenting, self-care, and of course our specialized area of bullying awareness and prevention. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, go ahead and do so now wherever you may be listening. And don't forget to set up your alerts so that you don't miss any episodes. Let's get started.
Hey, welcome back to the DaliTalks Podcast. I took a hiatus because there were a lot of things going on in my life, and I needed to focus on that. So I'm ready to come back, share some stories with you. I will be having some guests that have been on the podcast in the past, but I've also coordinated some new people to come in, and I hope that you really enjoy it. One of the things that I really want to work more on this next time around is getting some more input from y'all. Y'all, you have no idea how hard it is when you're creating something and you're asking for feedback. There's this notion that, hey, if you put out this really good content, people will say something, but that's not always the case. Some people just love it and they keep coming back. But as a creator, it makes you doubt yourself sometimes because you're thinking, well, wow, is it just not that interesting that they don't want to comment? So I ask if you could just give me an idea of what it is that you like or what it is that you need so that I can improve this podcast. All right. So I want to talk to you today about something that I learned through personal experience. So I have two teenagers right now who are working, 16 and 17. Uh, and they come home and they tell me about what's going on at work. Now they work for a fast food place. It's very recognizable throughout the United States. Um, and they overall treat them pretty good from the sense of like being kind to them and trying to respect the law. The law when it comes to minors working. However, there have been some issues that I absolutely uh, abhor. That's how strongly I feel about it because I feel like some of the leadership has a mentality about teenagers that is very negative, and they use that mentality to justify the way that they treat them. For example, they belittle them by saying, little passive aggressive things, or they yell at them. And I always tell my kids, like, look, you didn't join the military, okay? So in the military, you join and you're gonna get yelled at and you expect it because that's what the military does, because they try to build character, they try to toughen you up. This is a fast food joint. Nobody should be yelling at you. You don't get paid enough to get yelled at. Hell, even in the military, you don't get paid enough to get yelled at. I mean, you only tolerate it in basic training and in your advanced individual training, your job training, AIT. After that, you're like, no, you're not going to yell at me. So first of all, before your child starts a job, I think that it's really important for you to look up the state laws. You can do that so simply by just typing in, employment for minors in the state of whatever state you're in, right? And you're going to be looking for something from the Department of Labor. Like, for example, here in Maryland, it's dllr.state.md.us. And then you'll be able to go in there and type in, minor employment or something like that, or like underage employment. And one of the best guides that you can find is the like minor fact sheet. That's what Maryland has. And it's really interesting because it breaks down everything that they can engage in, like non-employment activities and permissible hours of employment. And it's broken down by age category. For example, like minors from 14 to 15, and these are the hours that they can and cannot work. And then minors 16 to 17, that's another category. And then they have like special permits, and if that's needed, like those are like for models and performers, entertainers, things like that. But I say this to say that you have to really know your rights and not just the law, right? Like that, this is more technical. Let's talk about the issue of being talked down to. Let's talk about how you're going to help your child get that confidence so that they speak up. I have one child who's very outspoken, doesn't really have a problem. She gets a little bit nervous sometimes with, like situations that are uncomfortable. But my other child, she will avoid conflict at all costs. And one day she came home and she was so upset that she wanted to cry because there was a supervisor who kept badgering her and another kid, and also telling them to be quiet, like, hush, you're talking too much. It's like, what is this? Grade school? It's crazy. So I had to tell her, you have to advocate for yourself. Like, look, no one can tell you to not talk. I mean, that is ridiculous unless you're at a call center and it requires you to be quiet because, other people are on the phone. But that is ridiculous. It's like, oh, hush, be quiet. You, you need to be quiet because I said so, just because I said so. Now, if you're failing at your job, I can understand, hey, hush, focus on your work. But when it's just because that's the way that the person likes it, it's crazy because I'm pretty sure that supervisor does not say that to the adult employees. So I was really upset about that, and I kind of want to get into mama bear mode and go down there and tell them a thing or two, but of course I can't do that. I mean, I can really because they're minors, but if I want them to learn how to advocate for themselves, then I should not do that. So the other thing too is breaks. Sometimes they say, oh, well, I didn't take my break. Well, why didn't you take your break? Oh, because they forgot because we're so busy. Okay. Okay, that's on you because it's up to you to keep track of your breaks. And sometimes they say, well, I didn't want to because I was so busy and I was going to feel bad and we're going to fall behind even more. I'm like, okay, I get that. But here's the thing. When you're starting your first job or two or even three, you have to establish some good habits. For most of corporate America, an employee, whether you are a teenager or in your 60s, you are just a number. You really are. It is rare to see employers who really treat you like a human being, like you actually matter. And I've gotten to experience that just once, and it was incredible. It was almost like, wait a minute, where am I? Twilight Zone. This is weird. But doing things like foregoing your break because it's going to overwhelm everybody else, that is not a you problem. That is their problem. Because guess what? When you are working, I'm pretty sure somebody else is taking their break because they're like, hey, it's my break. You know, that is part of um, dealing with reality. Employers are always going to have their seasons where they're really busy, but business keeps going. They manage, right? So my child was feeling a little woozy and stuff, and I was like, nah, this is not right. You take your break. Make sure you drink water. Make sure you take your lunch. Do it. And she was like, oh, okay. And she didn't feel, and I know she probably didn't do it in the next few days. But my hope is that eventually she just does it every single day. And this is a form of self-advocacy. Just like the supervisor who kept telling her and the other kid to be quiet and keep working. I said to her, you need to be assertive. You 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 cannot use certain words like could you please, or well, like you can't use passive language. because people will not take you seriously. In a situation like that, I would have said, I would have asked, is my talking hindering my work? Is it slowing us down? Am I not completing the task? They would probably say no. It's like, okay, then I don't see why I need to be quiet just because you don't like it. I mean, there's so many ways that you can pose it. And I come off maybe sometimes a little too aggressive in situations like these. And I do it because if it's the first time, I want them to know how serious I am. And I want it to stop right there. The issue needs to be shut down right there. But other people are not like that, right? And I hate when I have to repeat myself to somebody, especially about something so simple, so simple. Um, so that's one example, right? The other one was calling out sick. Okay. So I get it. These fast food places have some days where it's just extremely fast. It's so much volume of people coming through. So my kid calls and says, or they have an app and says, I can't come in. I'm not feeling well. I'm dizzy and I want to throw up, stuff like that. So mistake number one is giving too much information. I know that and this is something that could be different in different states, but I know that for the most part, when you are calling out sick, if it's sickness, it falls under HIPAA law. HIPAA is a law that protects you from this having to disclose your medical information to anyone. So I tell the girls, if you are going to call out because of health issues, then just say, hey, I'm going to take a sick day. You can say, like, I'm not well, but then what these people do here at this place of employment, because both of them work at the same place, what they do is they say, oh, what's wrong? And they say, oh, well, I'm not feeling good. I feel woozy. I want to throw up. I have a headache, blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, how bad is it? I'm like, well, I don't want to go in. So like, well, I think that you can come in. We need you to come in. I'm like, what the heck? How are you going to tell me how bad I'm feeling if I'm feeling good enough to go to work despite my ill, symptoms? That's crazy. They don't have the right to do that. And I know that a lot of these supervisors, a lot of them are young as well. So they're being trained by the older people who have never had to follow that law or that rule. The other thing too is personal time off, right? PTO. So this happened as well. I need a day off. I'm not going to come in. No, actually, they asked. They're like, hey, can I have this day off? And they're like, well, why? Well, I have a concert to go to that, somebody gifted me the ticket to. Too much information right there. Too much information. All they need to know is I have a personal thing or I have a personal issue that I need to take care of. They don't need to know your business. They have no right to ask. It is PTO. Now, I know that kids who work part-time are not earning PTO. They're not earning our leave hours, but that still doesn't mean that you have to go and tell them your business. All they need to know is, hey, I'm going to take tomorrow off. And you don't ask, you tell. I know that sounds really harsh for some people because they're not used to it, but no. When you really need a day off, you tell them, hey, I will not be there because I have something very important to take care of. Now, the very important thing, it could be a concert. That's probably very important to you. Doesn't matter. They don't need to know that. All they need to know is that you have something very important. Now, some of you might be saying, well, that's wrong. That's teaching kids to use PTO the wrong. Okay. All right. I get that. The point here is teaching them to not say too much, teaching your kids to get what they want when they need it, right? Now, of course, I'm not saying, hey, go and abuse the system. I'm just saying, like, for example, there was an event that was pretty special. It included like a family member. I think it was like the baby shower or something. It's a once in a lifetime thing, right? And um, say like they didn't have the that day off, they were scheduled to work. One of the things that these places do is that they allow the person to try to give away their shift to another person. And people usually volunteer because they want more hours. And say nobody volunteered to take that shift. So I told my child, like, okay, this is something really, really special, and I would miss work for it. So yeah, you need to tell them, like, hey, you won't be in. If they ask you, personal, it's something personal. And they were not very comfortable with that, but they're starting to see the importance of it because now every time that they have had to have a change in their schedule or at least or not go in, they're noticing how much they want to control that situation, and they want to ask more questions. Well, why? Like for example, the day that one of my kids she was actually very sick and she was kind of like in and out. She wasn't fully awake. So she sent them, a message through the app, and they asked her what was going on. She said, "I'm not well. I'm falling asleep. I'm going in and out. My body hurts. I have a huge headache." And so the supervisor comes back and says, "Well, I think that you can still work. It sounds like you're still able to, so we're going to need you to come in." Luckily, my kid fell asleep and she woke up like maybe 2 hours prior to her shift ending, or, had she been there, and she didn't go in. But it just really makes me so upset that these people want to decide how ill somebody is and make them come in if they feel like they're not ill enough. That's ludicrous. Like, I wouldn't stand for that. Um, so yeah, talk to them about their breaks, talk to them about the way that people should or should not be speaking to them, talk to them about being assertive, making their point and not asking in certain situations, but telling them, and remind them that there is no job that is worth you giving up your health over, because you're just a number when it comes down. It doesn't matter if everybody's super nice. If they let you go, they replace you immediately. They replace you so fast. Yes, you should be grateful because, like, having employment is a privilege in the United States. It is. A lot of people don't see it that way because they're like, oh, America, I mean, the United States is, the place where dreams happen, possibilities. It's true, but it is still a privilege to be able to work. There are so many people who desire the ability to come and clean bathrooms at a restaurant because they just want a job. There are so many people that they won't mind flipping burgers. There are people who, of course, have the bigger dreams of doing something that pays way, way more, and that's absolutely beautiful. But it is still a privilege. It is a privilege to be able to work. Having a body that allows you to have a job is a privilege. It is a gift. So please talk to your children about self-advocacy in the workplace, because being a teenager, being a young person is great because you have all the stamina, you have all the energy, you have a long, long path ahead of yourself where you can shape your career however you want. But at the same time, people underestimate you. People overwork teenagers as well. It's not fair. There was another friend of one of my kids who worked at a pizza place, and the supervisor would withhold a paycheck until they felt like it, just because maybe they had money issues or whatever. But it's not fair. That's not how we do things. And he only did that to the teenagers because he knew they were teenagers. the adults who had the bills and the families and all, he'd pay them. So it's crazy because they're devaluing the work just because they are teenagers who don't have the bills that everybody else does. But they need their money too. They don't know their business. They might be needing that money because they have to pay for AP exams. They might need that money because they already are in college and they have to pay that tuition. They might just need that money because they're homeless. Just because it's a teenager doesn't mean that they don't have bills or things to take care of, things to pay. So talk to teenagers. And one of the suggestions that I think would be most likely accepted at a school is like with your PTO or PTA, is to bring in somebody from the Department of Labor or somebody from the school who is familiar with the labor laws for teens and talk to parents and the teens about what their rights are. Now, I am not an attorney, so this is all just information I'm sharing. There's not legal advice. So, but the way that you can start is by going to your Department of Labor website and checking out their laws. And I'm just going to go over the Maryland one, the minor fact sheet that Maryland put out, just to give you an idea. Okay, so here's permissible hours of employment. All minors may not be employed or permitted to work more than 5 hours continuously without a non-working period of at least a half hour. And then it breaks it down from 14 to 15 years old. And just, I'm going to run through it really, really fast, and I'm not going to read every single one of them, but just to give you an idea. For non-school hours, okay, 3 hours on any day when school is in session. They can, let's see, work 8 hours on any day when school is not in session, 40 hours in any week when school is not in session. And they even have like limitations on the hours that they can work in throughout the day. So they may only work between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. There's a reason for that. It's because kids need time for homework. May work until 9 p.m. from June 1st until Labor Day because they're out of school for the most part, right? So these are the type of laws that you see, like in the section for minors between the ages of 16 and 17, it says may spend no more than 12 hours in a combination of school hours and work hours each day. Must be allowed at least 8 consecutive hours of non-work, non-school time in each 24 period. And then as far as non-employment activities, they let's see, activities not considered employment if performed outside of the prescribed school day, and the activity does not involve mining, factoring, manufacturing, or hazardous occupations. And these activities include farm work performed on a farm, domestic work performed in or about a home, caddying on a golf course, employment as an instructor or an instructional boat, delivery of newspapers to the consumer, and then hazardous work performed by non-paid volunteers of a volunteer fire department or company or volunteer rescue squad who have completed or are taking a core study relating to firefighting or rescue and who are 16 years of age or older. So you see, they try to protect the kids. They try to also give them the opportunity to work, but everything is, like everything is set so that the kids are not exploited, so that they're not put in danger, and so that they can still make money if they want to work. So anyway, this fact sheet is 2 pages long here in Maryland. I don't know what yours might be in your state, but take a look. If you're not even, aware of the age that they can start working, ask, go to the Department of Labor. I know that there are some states that allow kids to work at the age of 14. Here it says a minor under the age of 14 is not permitted to work and may not be employed. And then they have minors from 14 to 17 may only work with a work permit. And then there's also like different type of establishments that will only hire 14-year-olds. But for the most part here in Maryland, kids have to be 16 to work. And I know my kids were like, oh, I can't wait until I turn 16 because nobody wants to hire me. Places like Target, they usually don't like to hire teens, but they will uh, sometimes, especially for like high traffic seasons. And also they're very selective. Like they hire people who come recommended by other employees, first of all, and who can prove or show, demonstrate that they are serious and that they are committed and able to stick to their schedules. Because that's one of the issues that, you know, there's a high turnover rate because there are also a lot of kids who are very irresponsible. And that's one of the things that I tell the girls, like, you can't just be calling out just to call out. Like, I understand, okay, the concert example, right? That was one of those where it's like, okay, or a baby shower, even some people are like, but some kids can't even make it to work on time, and that is horrible. To this day, I keep hearing a lot of small business owners that say it's just hard to find people who can be at work on time. That is such a basic thing to do, right? And yet it's not being done, not just by teens, but adults. It's horrible. So I tell my kids, you're not going to be one of those. You have to be at work early because being on time is late. And that's maybe just my military training, but it makes sense because you never know. Like I tell them, being 15 minutes early is good because something could happen on the way, but sometimes it's necessary to be, a little earlier because if your commute is really long and you know that things happen on the way, maybe 30 minutes early is better because you might just get caught up in something. But yeah, there's so much more that I could cover about teens and the workplace. But I wanted to share this because this has opened my eyes to so much, and it makes me so, so upset to know how much kids are being exploited. They really are. They not just mistreat them, but they abuse them by not letting them take their breaks during their shifts, and also by overworking them. Sometimes they completely ignore the law on how many hours they can work a school night, or they put them in dangerous situations. It's just not cool. And then also they withhold their pay or not pay them at all. It's ridiculous. All right. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think about it. And also, if you want to share some of the things that you learned, regarding employment law for minors, please share. I'd love to know. I'd love to know how different other states are. All right. Like always, please share this episode. And I hope that you took something away that is really helpful. And you know what? I might just be hearing from you. Don't forget that you can also go on to Apple Podcasts if you're listening through there and leave a review. Thanks so much for listening.
Hey, did you like that episode? If you did, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you may be listening and write a review. If you want more tips or some behind-the-scenes videos, make sure to follow my mom at DaliTalks on Instagram. You can turn on notifications for her posts and stories as well. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. See you next time.